What is up, everybody? Welcome to Venison Gains Podcast. I almost said the previous name there. I had to pause. 150 episodes saying the other name. So, Venison Gains. If you're new to the rebranded podcast, we're focusing mostly on hunting, outdoors, and obviously going to be a bias in fitness as well here, since that is my background. But if you are just looking for fitness information, I co-host the Stop Talk About Fat Loss podcast. Anyways, guys, before we get into today's podcast, which I'm super excited to do, this one's a little bit overdue. We're going to talk about how healthy is wild game, which I think is going to be something many of you are interested in. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we jump into that, obviously, if you don't follow the other podcasts, make sure you go and do that. You can find it very easily by just searching for it, or you can go into the more like this if you're on Spotify, and we'll show you that one. But also make sure you give me a follow on Instagram or TikTok, join our Facebook group. When this comes out, this episode, we're getting ready to do a free, keyword is free, 3-day challenge over in our Facebook group. So make sure you go and join the Commit to Fit Facebook group. So that's going to be a awesome challenge. Last time it was really good. A lot of people had really great results from it. There's also free shit down below. There's the Mastering Your Macros guide, I believe is down below, but also there's coupon codes for different supplements. So Legion and Levels, if you want really good high quality protein powders, they're going to be really good go-tos down below. Chris LWA is the code for Legion. That's a link for Levels you have to click, which is the hyperlink down below. And then multivitamins, fish oil, stuff like that. Legion and Seeking Health are great resources for that. Anyways, let's get into it. So how healthy is wild game? I decided to do this because I reposted one of the reels that went semi-viral. I say semi-viral because it didn't actually break 100,000 views, but it was, 60,000 views when it did well. I gained a ton of followers from that post. I think that was posted 2 years ago now. So with someone said about long form content and how that would be better to do more wild game, which I agree. That video is like 2.5 minutes long, and it's really tough to do 2.5 minutes and go over everything. So those are available on my TikTok. If you go there, so obviously that link's down below if you don't follow me on TikTok. I have them all organized. So if you go to the profile, there's a playlist going over all of them, and most of them are labeled, so you can find whatever you're looking for that way. So I did organize those for you to find easily. Anyways, I am going out this weekend to the property that I do most of my successful, I should say, hunting on. So this will be the first time hunting on that property this year. The neighbor who helps out and does some hunting already said he mostly does, I would say, trophy hunting. So he's targeting very older class bucks, whereas I'm more or less meat hunting. I like the big buck, but I might save the tag. But I'm probably going to harvest it. My goal is to harvest something, so I'm probably going to harvest a doe since we're low on venison. So we're going out there. I'm planning on getting out there and being able to hunt tomorrow night, which when you're listening to this, obviously the weekend's going to be already over. I'll probably share all that stuff on my stories and stuff. We'll see. But first time getting out to that property, I kind of have a game plan, and I think that's always important for everyone to have, is some sort of plan for attack that makes sense, not just random, which is what I've done in the past. 2 years ago, it was kind of random hunting versus now it's, I understand a lot more than I did. Each year I'm trying to learn. And the past couple of weeks, I burn myself out with every year with hunting. So in January, this podcast, or I'd say more February, March, probably going to talk a little bit less and more about hiking and getting outdoors, which is fine because that's going to be scouting season anyways. but I'm probably going to be a little bit burnt out. But every year I'm trying to learn more and more, and you can only absorb so much. Like if you try to learn everything in 1 year, it's kind of like trying to cram for a final exam, and then not everything sticks. Like you might pass it, but not everything sticks. Or you did it, but you don't understand the why. And the why, like, okay, I know I need to do calls, but why? What's the call? When shouldn't you call? If the buck's right in front of you and can see you, do you do a grunt call? Probably not, because you're going to catch you. But if he's walking away, different story. So, understanding why, and each year I understand a little bit more. Each year I'm trying to learn and become better. So I'm excited. We have a new stand-up, which I think I'm going to hunt the morning. Right now, that's the plan. Now, there's some game cameras, so I'm going to see. I also like that it's near a bedding area, so I don't. If they're in there at night, and hopefully the battery stayed on, if they're in there at night, I'm not, or before I would get in there, I'm not going to hunt it because it's going to be too damn early. They're already going to be there, and I'm going to spook them out. But it's about 25 yards off of a really like the largest bedding area I've found in the area, other than what's like on edges, which I know that they're there before dawn. So it's like I'd have to get there like 2 a.m, and then they're probably going to catch wind of me. So anyways, excited to get some venison in the freezer. Still have to, get the deer in front of me within a reasonable range and have that arrow fly true and then recover that deer. So it's not, no guarantees. It's called hunting for a reason. So anyways, getting that ready. And then obviously I've been talking, I'm excited potentially to be able to get out for muzzleloader. So I am in the, I have to go and find primers. So I think next week I have to run down to Cabela's and get some 209 primers for it. Just no time this week. One, we got sick. The whole house got sick. So I was in a serious brain fog. Like I'm doing this podcast late. I'm just getting over sick. So if I sound nasally, if I mispronounce words, it's because my sinuses are still semi-clogged. They're feeling much better. The throat's no longer on fire. I'm not like constantly having a runny nose, but I can tell like once I start talking for a while, like, there's still some stuff up there. So anyways, we are looking at potentially going down to Cabela's, because I think that's the only place that really does it. Well, I could have ordered from Cabela's, but it's like $17 for the primers. But because it's considered a dangerous item to ship, it was $25 in shipping. I was like, no, not going to pay that. So have to get down there for that. Regardless, we have to get through this weekend and see what happens. So maybe next week or next weekend, Sunday, potentially get out. Potentially this Sunday, I'll be able to go to, I'm going to call the local sportsman shop where I'm hunting in Gettysburg and see if they have it. I didn't see anything on their website. So that would be way easier because there's no hunting in Pennsylvania on Sundays, other than 3 towards the end of the season here. So can't do anything Sunday. So might as well just like go ahead and see what I'm doing. So before we get into how healthy is hunting wild game, we have some venison that needs to be ground out with me. So I'm not doing ground venison. I'm going to make stew. So one thing I found is I hunt and it takes a ton of not necessarily physical, because I'm a tree stand hunter, not a ton of physical, but a ton of mental energy. And you are tired, you're getting up early and you're having those adrenaline rushes, and it is physically taxing to get out, even if you're not going that far. I'm trying to be quiet. It is it's a 40 acre parcel, but most of the 40 acres is either big chunk, I'd say about 10 acres has been built up a little bit, and then another 25-ish is ag land, and so soybeans are out there right now. So in terms of the woodlands, maybe 5 acres of woodlands, which is where I hunt out of. So if you spook the deer are gone. Now, they're the neighboring properties, big woods and everything, so they easily come across. But if you spook them out, they're off the property. There's no place else on that property for them to really hide. They're going to run off onto the neighbor's land. So to get out, it is a little bit taxing to quietly, and you're on. And if you're like not a hunter, like you are on, you're listening, you're trying to make all your steps be as quiet as possible. You're trying to, if you make a noise, trying to sound like a smaller animal so you don't spook the deer. You're trying to get into your metal tree stand and not have things clanging around. So that is the situation going now. So anyways, what I was saying is I tend to get very tired and I don't feel like cooking anything. Even though I love to cook, like you hunt all morning, you come back, you're starving. Even though I have snacks, I addressed this in the last podcast. You have snacks and stuff, but it's not real food. You're like, I need real food. So I never feel like cooking anything. And even at night, like if I harvest a deer, guess what? I'm going to be busy. I'm not going to just like, oh, well, I'm going to go back and just cook something. No, like now I have to, find it for evening harvest, find it, gut it, process it at least the bare minimum, which, doesn't take it, not necessarily, well, they like to come out last light. So you might wait half an hour to an hour for, till you go and search for the deer. Then you're going to go track it, which is going to take time, pull out. So if right now it's about 7:00 is when it ends. So way past time, dinner time, basically. So if you are going to go and find it, so we're talking, unless you see it pile up, the earliest you're going to start tracking would be like 7:30ish or 8:00. So yeah, you don't really have enough time to go and like make anything. Plus your adrenaline's so high at those moments that you're probably not going to be hungry at all. So you're going to wait, go track it. So let's say earliest then is 8:30 if you're lucky for like only a half hour track, but it might be up to an hour that you're tracking it unless you had a bad shot, in which case you're tracking even longer. Then you have to gut it, process it, hang it, all those steps. So 9-10:00, not unreasonable. So probably going to be hungry, going to be tired. It's not cold yet, but you potentially could be cold. I'm not sure what the nights are going to get down to. So what I'm doing this time around is I'm making, like, instead of like a beef stew, like I'm doing a venison stew. So it's going to have veggies and potatoes. And we're kind of just like wiping out our fridge for this. And so that's going to be my lunch and dinner. So dinner tomorrow night, lunch and dinner for Saturday, and potentially lunch. So I'm going to eat it like 4 times. So that's my idea. I got venison out to do it. I'm going to have it cook overnight and then be able to pack it up, put it in the cooler tomorrow to take out. So that's my goal this time around, of like, hey, like I can put these in mason jars. Everything will be portioned out. This will be great. All I have to do when I go in for lunch for like the all day hunt, the morning when I do a split day hunt on Saturday, is go in, heat, breakfast. I'm going to do yogurt and granola. Just keeping that super basic. So I'm going to do that for my quote unquote breakfast. And then for lunch, which will probably be a late lunch because it's going to be a late breakfast, probably going to be a late lunch right before I go out. All I have to do is heat that up real quick, go out, and then same thing when I come back in. All I have to do is heat that up really quick. So that's my plan to keep it fairly healthy. So again, it's going to be like venison and barley, or venison and potatoes, carrots, celery, onion, lots of different, veggies in there. So it's checking off all the boxes. I'm going to get fiber. I'm going to get protein. I'm going to get carbs. I'm going to get healthy fats, etc. Which leads us now into this topic. Why is wild game so healthy, or what is healthy about wild game? So you probably heard from the carnivore crowd like how healthy beef is. And beef does have a lot of really good quality micronutrients to it. And we should define like healthy is providing the body with nutrition. It is supplying the body with something that is beneficial to it, that it needs. In a way that is, sorry, told you I was getting over being sick, in a way that is easy to absorb for the most part. So wild game tends to be very lean, which is actually good. So when the carnivore crowd says like, oh, our ancestors ate red meat and this, and technically true. But when we look at most of our ancestors, not pointing the Inuits, nothing against the Inuits, but a lot of times the carnivore or paleo or whatever crowd points to the people living in the most extreme situations to justify eating super fatty meat. If you look at other peoples, like people towards the equator, they eat more lean red meats, more lean meat in general, and then they're eating a higher carbohydrate diet, and they tend to be just as healthy. They're eating potatoes and plantains and taro root and these other things. So regardless, there's pros and cons to both, but for most of human history, we were eating lean meat, like wild game that we're going to have. So wild game is very lean. Wild game is going to, and because of that leanness, the micronutrients tend to be more concentrated. Now, there's going to be variation depending on what those animals can eat. Anytime we talk about this stuff, it's going to be all over the place. I apologize if you hear my dog in the background, but what I mean by all over the place is it depends on the diet of the deer. Are these deer or whatever wild game eating a very healthy, well-balanced diet? Are they in a situation where food is scarce? They might be a little bit depleted. Are they eating a lot of food that's high in calories? Let's say like corn, high in calories but low in nutrients. Like that's kind of like junk food for them. So it depends. In general, though, they're going to be eating a wide variety of foods and have the micronutrients that come out. So because of the leanness, they tend to have higher amounts of most of your micronutrients, other than selenium, however you say it. The reason for that is usually supplemented for good reason, because deficient selenium levels lead to a whole bunch of issues with animals, and some soils are very deficient. I think like Michigan tends to be depleted in selenium, so a lot of times animals up there become depleted. So we want to that's some of the stuff where beef actually beats them out, and beef are going to beat them out in certain things. I think zinc also, a lot of times beef is a little bit higher, and some things are supplements. Sometimes it's just the way the animals are. Like beef, cows just need more zinc, so therefore they carry more zinc, for example. But in general, the wild game is going to be more concentrated. So if you eat 4 ounces of venison, it's going to have more nutrition, more micronutrients than the beef, because how lean it is, because there's not much in the way of vitamins and minerals in the fat, despite what a lot of people will say. There's really not that much. Yes, there might be some fat soluble vitamins, but it's really not that concentrated. It's not. There's some, but it's mostly just fat. It's mostly just calories. So lean meat, and then the fats that you do get tend to be higher in omega-3s, which obviously we know is good for you. So we're getting very little fat, plus the fat we do get tends to be higher in omega-3s. For wild game. And there's going to be variation. So whitetail is going to be a little bit different than elk, which is going to be a little bit different than moose. Moose tends to be, when you look at all of them, the leanest, but there's always variation. So when we're talking wild game, usually we're talking like the red meats, elk, venison, moose, etc. And they all are very, very high in your micros. They are. Most of the B vitamins are very high. Most of your minerals are very high. Copper is actually really high. Iron can be extremely high, where you actually have to worry about hemochromatosis if you eat way too much of it, for men generally, because you can get hemochromatosis, basically iron overload. So you do need to be aware of that. Anyways, all those things are really good for you. So wild game is very healthy in that aspect. Wild game, when we're looking at things like small game, squirrel, rabbit, grouse, they're also very high in nutrition and tend to be, if you're comparing small game. So a lot of times I find people will compare small game to chicken. So like the red meat's compared to beef, the small game's compared to chicken. So squirrel tends to be higher in a lot of the nutrition, a lot of the micronutrients, higher than chicken in a lot of ways. And a more fair comparison would be squirrel to pork. They're both omnivorous. But we usually compare like small game to what we would be like our small game domesticated animals. So squirrel's actually very high in a lot of nutrients. So it's actually very high in iron. It is rabbit's high in a lot of your nutrients, and a lot of the B vitamins. Now, the red meat ones tend to be the highest. So I will say that. So venison tends to be the highest in things. Squirrel tends to be a little bit lower. Wild boar's lower. Rabbit's lower in a lot of them, but they might have one or two things that like stand out. Like I was saying, squirrel with iron, it's like pretty stand out. Like it's not necessarily higher. It's like, oh shit, it's a really good source of that. And it's, when I'm saying lower, is nobody's just eating squirrel. Like we're eating a variety of food. So it's like, okay, well, a serving of that plus these other things that you might get close to 80% of a lot of your nutrients in a single meal. And they're all lean. The only wild game that's not lean tends to be waterfowl, duck, goose, etc. If you keep the fat on. If you cut the fat away, they're lean. But if you keep the fat on, they're one of the few game meats that are actually fatty. And that's why in a lot of cultures, duck is so important. Like if you look at Asia, duck tends to be everywhere. Why? Well, it was one of the few game meats that you could get that was actually fatty, and fat was, very important. You could render that down and have that during the winter, use it for cooking, added calories, make pemmican out of it. I think I said that right. With fat. So you that fat's very important, for survival. So that's why in a lot of cultures, duck is super important, or goose is super important. Waterfowl in general. So wild game in general is a great source of most of your nutrients, and they're a good source of pretty much all of them. Now, there's certain things that plants tend to be better in, like folate. So you can't be like, oh, well, it's a perfect source of everything. Well, vitamin C, folate, a lot of your fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, they tend to be better from plants. So there's not a perfect, like, oh, it has everything. No. But in general, they're very good sources. You can get folate through liver. And I will say, if you haven't harvested organs, you've harvested an animal and haven't eaten organs, I would recommend the heart, liver. Again, as long as you don't gut shoot it, you can try those things out and see how they are. Heart's pretty good. We do quite a few things with heart. Fresh liver is almost unbeatable. I will say every deer I've had has had a liver that tastes different. So usually what I'll do with venison liver is make a mousse out of it. However, what I've learned after doing that with a ruddy buck is eat a piece first. And if you don't like it with just a little bit, like soak it in milk, salt, and pepper, if you don't like it like that, don't make a mousse out of it. Because it is very gamey sometimes. It was, every single one's been different. So that was like a few containers of pate / mousse that we did not eat. I was like, that feels like a waste. So we will test it out first, and then if I like it, my wife doesn't like it. If we like it, then we'll make pate or mousse out of it, and that's a good way to get a lot of your nutrients in. Two, it's not the most diet friendly if you're in a fat loss phase, but if you're in a maintenance or a build phase, liver's super high in a lot of nutrients. Where we need to actually make sure we don't eat too much, but making a mousse or pate that you have a few times a week, weekends with some wine or something, or to relax with friends, a little bit on crackers or bread, banh mi sandwiches, use pate, usually a pork pate, but you could do venison. That's a great way to get some of those nutrients in, and utilize all parts. Try to be like nose to tail with the animals. So wild game, super, super nutritious, high in a lot of things, highly recommended in your diet, easy to fit into your diet since the macros are similar to boneless, skinless chicken breast for the most part with most animals. Now, what a lot of people do is add the fat to it. So you need to worry more about how much fat and other things you add, flour and breadcrumbs and whatever you're making. So that's where you can get into trouble. The thing is, you can control that easier than beef. So you can control of like, yeah, we do need to add fat so it doesn't dry out, but we can cut back the fat for the recipe. Anyways, I hear my girl screaming upstairs. So I don't know if you can hear that listening, but I'm going to end it here so I can go help out with them. Anyways, if you enjoy the podcast, consider like, subscribe, follow whatever's appropriate for the platform, or rate it. Give it a 5-star review with whatever platform you're listening on. That helps the show get pushed out so more people can find it. And as always, you can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Coach Chris Heskett.